What's up, everybody? Welcome back to 30 to Life. And this right here is another episode of Bucket Talk with your boy Uso Ron and my partner right here, my co-host Richie. So get ready to tune in. We got some good shit for y'all. So Richie, today, man, I wanted to talk with you about communication. You know, something that I have a hard time with. You might not realize that because I talk a lot. But interesting enough, I do have a hard time communicating with people because, you know, as a youngster, I've always dealt with things like, you know, by yelling or with anger because I had to protect myself because I was bullied and things like that. We don't need to get into that, but, you know, I've learned to defend myself a lot whenever I feel like I'm being attacked, you know, and most of the time probably really ain't being attacked. Nothing really is happening, but I feel that way, right? Mm-hmm. So what would you say about that as far as communication goes? Like, you know, how can I recognize the red flags, or how can I recognize or maybe even practice some steps or something that can help me communicate better with people like my significant other or something like that, my family?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, man. It's, you know, communicating. Sometimes we don't realize exactly how we're communicating or what we're trying to communicate. Right. We get caught up in a moment and things like that. For me, I had to really understand, for one, what I'm trying to communicate, which means I had to tap into myself, you know what I mean? It was difficult. But how I communicate with other people is going to dictate most likely the response. You know, if I'm yelling at them because I'm caught and like, I don't want to be bullied, I don't want, you know, I'm tapped into something that was maybe some type of issue that I had in the past where it brings up fear or pain or being embarrassed or whatever, you know, I'd be like, I'm going to yell at you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk at you. Right. You're going to get a completely different me, which was the normal me. And it's like, what is going on with you right now, man? You are tripping. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like, for what? For nothing. It's probably not what's happening. Right. I lived that life. Right. But, man, when I started realizing what is the situation, right? And I can look at it and go, okay, this is what it is. Once again, look at the facts, right? I started going, okay, well, that's completely different than what I used to do, right? It's like I'd make up all kinds of stuff, right? No, this is what it is. No, it ain't, right? And go, how now if I'm more calm, right, I can communicate a little bit better. I'm not going to be aggressive in tone, right? The little communication styles that they have, I'm passive aggressive. You know, if I'm aggressive, probably not going to get nowhere. But if I'm assertive, I'm going to take different things into account. Yeah. If I'm assertive, I'm taking, you know, the view and approach of how are you going to respond by the way I'm communicating with you? Mm-hmm. Because if you communicate with me the way I'm communicating with you most of the time, I'm not going to receive nothing you're talking about. And then you're going to get a completely different me out of it. Right. I would stay stuck there, man. I would end up in conflicts and stuff. I think I'm pretty articulate, right? But the way I communicated was aggressive. And I really didn't know exactly what I wanted to say or what I was trying to say, right? What are my freaking goals, man? I didn't have a lot, right? I'm just going through the day and going through the motions of life rather than saying, what are your goals for the day? Right. You know, what are your goals for life? Well, then I'm learning and understanding. I can kind of communicate a little bit better each time. Right. And kind of be mindful.
Yeah. You get really deep into it. You know, you think about a lot of the things as far as like what the other person may be going through and what you may be going through to cause you to react a certain way. So you break things down like that. But for the average individual, the average person out here, right? Let's say like with me, right, I'm in traffic and I get in an argument with somebody, right, because they cut me off and we're not getting nowhere. We're arguing because he's arguing his point, I'm arguing my point. Like at that moment, you know, I remember you telling me like if someone like is setting you off, kind of getting to you, you practice this one thing, like looking at the crack on the ground, you know, and like, look at that crack on the ground, you know what I mean? And kind of gets you to refocus on something else. Is that something that you practice during conflict or whatever? So maybe that we could do? Is that a step that we can take?
Absolutely. Grounding plays a huge part in it. It's just removing yourself to stop the thought patterns of what's going on right now. Get out of that, right? And hell yeah, that is a really, really good tool. It took me a long time to do it. And I know like so many people, including me, for one, I don't do it all the time, right? But what I've learned is to be mindful of how I communicate with people, the type of things that I do say, make sure I don't offend people, because then I'm more likely to stay out of those conflicts from the beginning.
Yeah.
But when they do come, it's just remember, I tell myself, hey, for one, just breathe. Don't say nothing yet, because I'm real witty and that tongue was sharp, man, you know, and I have an aggressive nature. First and foremost, breathe. Don't say what you want to say right now, right?
Yeah.
And another thing is just ask myself, is it really that serious, man?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, damn, most of the time, I mean, almost every single time, it's not really that serious.
No,
right?
it isn't.
And so those just as simple things, man. It's like, take a deep breath. You know, if I'm really struggling, you know, looking at the crack or just, you know, looking up at the sky or something, ground myself. Because if I'm thinking about the sky, if I'm thinking about the crack in the ground, I'm not processing what I'm thinking about doing to this person. You know what I mean? Or something's going to fly out of my mouth. Breathe and just, hey, what are you tripping on right now? You know?
Yeah. Okay. So grounding yourself, that sounds like a good thing to do. And with other people that are very like, you know, like come up to you with this conflict and they want to argue with you and things like that. If grounding doesn't work for me, would you just suggest to walk away? The reason why I'm asking you this is because people that have a big ego, you know what I mean? See, I'm old now and I understand I have an ego now, you know. At first I thought it was me, but now it's just me. It's my ego talking a lot of times. So for a regular average Joe, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do they get over that ego? How do they understand that that's what they're doing is protecting themselves? Do they got to like look back into their past and see where, you know, where the first time they had to stand up and take care of themselves and protect themselves? I mean,
yeah, it starts somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
it
what
goes deep, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, how deep do people really want to go? You know, for me, sometimes I'll just go on one and, you know, break stuff down like you were talking about, like going to the board as a lifer. You better let the board know that you have insight and that you understand where all this stuff comes from. So you have to do this work. A lot of people, you know, maybe they haven't done what I've done for sure. So the need to go that deep and find out some things that may help them, you know, it's not so much of an incentive, you know, and people have their own ideas of what that looks like and, you know, no problem. But for me, man, I really looked at the ego, right? We're getting up in age and stuff like that. It's the ego speaking. You realize that you have it. What do I do with it? I always ask myself, what do you feel challenged by? You know, what is going on that is you're struggling with right now? What is it really? Is it this person or is it you? Does this look familiar to you? Like something that I have a fear of? Or it's tapped into some kind of embarrassing moment for me, feeling inadequate and stupid, kind of like we was talking about before. The shame and the guilt aspect of all comes into play. And it's just like, man, what is the situation right now? Is it really that serious? What do you feel challenged by? What are you afraid of right now? And it's just fascinating because it does tap into some old historical elements of life.
Right. Yeah. And that ego can be a mother, you know what I mean? Like it really can confuse you and make you think that, you know, that's really who you are. Yeah. You know, but you're really just protecting yourself.
I have to show him. Don't you know who I think I am?
How dare you?
That's one thing I realized. You know what I mean? I used to say, man, this dude don't know who I am.
Yeah. How
dare
you
don't know? Then I realized, like, man, don't you know who I think I am? Right? Because who I think I am is not really who I am.
Real talk.
Because inside, I mean, people don't want to hear this stuff, man.
No.
And people definitely don't want to say it. But the truth is, when you can start admitting what the real truth is and you go hard in the paint, you look at what the situation is, you're going to see what the true answers are, man, and it will change your life.
Yes, sir.
People got to be willing to look. And I support you. I represent you. I'm on your side. I love you for doing that. And it's difficult. But the reality is, man, is who I think I am most of the time was not who I truly am.
Right.
And I was a scared little boy walking through life, man. You know, and I acted out because that was my ego. I had to prove to you and prove to everybody else, mostly to prove to myself that what I felt about myself wasn't true. So there's where the ego is going to come into play for me. And I acted crazy, man.
That's real talk.
For sure.
Yeah, I just recently heard a quote by Mike Tyson, and he was basically saying that when I think I'm somebody, I'm offended. And when I realize that I'm nobody, it's okay. You see what I'm saying? And so I think that's the problem is a lot of us walk around thinking we're somebody. Yeah, how dare you? How dare you insult me? How dare you disrespect me? Don't you know who I am? You know what I'm saying? And so that's that thing, man. Again, that ego popping up, and people got to recognize this, because that's what gets you locked up in prison.
Man, and that
Real talk.
communication, circle it right back around the communication. That's how we communicate. So if we're feeling that way, how are we communicating?
Yeah.
We're not saying, "Oh, sir, you just hurt my feelings." We ain't doing that. We say, weak ass shit, man. Right. We're looking at him and say, "Man, you, what?
Yeah.
What do you want to do, man?"
Yeah.
Right. Or just take off on this guy or something, man. But it's like how I'm learning how to deal with myself has taught me a lot about what I need to do to help myself deal with other people. Because if I'm struggling with whatever it may be, maybe I'm not in pain, maybe I'm not embarrassed or afraid, right? I'm living my life, but I'm struggling. Well, that's going to provoke emotions, and I'm going to still be struggling, right? Well, maybe somebody else is doing the same stuff, but that's how he's doing what he's doing with his own stuff.
That's how they deal with it.
And so being understanding of that is going to help me to communicate. Communication, man, is such a huge key to being able to move and navigate through this life with minimal issues.
And having compassion for others, just not knowing what the other person's story is, you know what I'm saying? We all go through shit.
Man.
Yeah, that's real talk.
It's part of life. What can I do to help? For one, I need to help myself. But once I understand, maybe I could help other people.
Right.
Right. And when we're approaching people with compassion rather than judgment and critique, right, and the old finger in the face type of routine, nobody's going to receive anything. And yet we're teaching ourselves that that's how we communicate from here on out. Right. Because there's where it taps back into my ego. Now, I showed him, because we're going to communicate that we have to let other people know who we truly are. Right. Don't you know? Right. So my communication is going to be based on that. What is it going to be? It's going to be negative, and you're going to probably end up, like you talk about, going back to the pen.
Exactly.
Or staying there.
Yeah. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of those guys that are back there behind the walls are in there because of their ego.
For sure. And stay there because of it. Can't break their ego to get themselves out. They can't even work themselves down to different levels of prisons because they want to go home, because they want to be somebody in prison. And some of these things, it may be difficult for other people to hear. Right. They're still cut up in that system. But the truth is, man, if you want to go home, you want to free yourself, you need to really overcome some obstacles within yourself. And it ain't nobody else, man. It's you. Look in the mirror and say, do I want to go home? Do I want to stay in this prison yard? Really, what do you want to do? Right. And when I ask myself that, well, I'm sitting here because of that. Right. And in the face of all that adversity and all those things and communication with breaking all this stuff down, I'm going to go home, man. And if you want to stay here, that's you. Right. But you want to live in prison, that's you. You want to think prison's something, that's you. You want to get caught up and think you're somebody while you're in prison because of that, that's you. But trust and believe, I know that I'm a small figure on this planet, and I'm okay with that. I don't need to be everybody. I'm enough of a somebody to not want to try to become everybody. I'm okay with that. But I made my decisions, and I know how to communicate. But the reality is, and the truth is, that's what's up. You can't duck and deny that.
Damn it, Jim.
Jim.
And there you have it. Bucket Talk
101.